Planet Mission Part 1 by David Claiborne, as read by the author. New chapters every Monday. The full novel is available on Amazon.com and other online retailers. Links in the description. Chapter 25. Its Toothy Grin. Junebug sat up in his bed and munched on a viti fruit. Tommy and Waters sat with him. Jazzy tended to him, happy to use her skills at last. Bo was not with them. He took the news of the APOC's death especially hard and had been despondent since their return. "Careful," Jazzy said. "You must have a natural ability to heal to have come so far in only a few days, but you still have a ways to go." They left the shelter door unzipped. A breeze moved the door flap gently and allowed in fresh air. The overcast clouds had begun to clear, and light filtered through the white PTFE fabric to illuminate the interior. "Jonathan's right, you know," Junebug said. "About the APOC, I know," Waters said. "I see that now. I still don't understand it, but he's right. They're right. It makes sense that the people who live and work on a planet would be the most knowledgeable about a planet, but they're colonists. It's such a contradiction." "I don't mean the APOC. I mean what he said before then," Junebug said. Waters looked up at Junebug, who continued. "I love learning about the world, about worlds. I love new discoveries. I love knowledge. I love understanding the way things work. I love technology. I love the process of science, the thought that if we've done everything right, we can know that we've learned something real, added something true to our understanding of the universe." Junebug looked intently at Waters before continuing. "But somewhere along the way, we got it wrong. Suddenly, the administration's goals were science, and science was just a formality preceding a foregone conclusion, and we couldn't disagree anymore. We started treating everything there is to know as if it was somehow the administration that gave us that knowledge, regardless of where it came from. As if all you needed to do was ask a question, and the administration would provide the answer. And if it couldn't, it was a question you shouldn't have asked. That's not what knowledge is. That's not what it was ever supposed to be. Learning is a process. It's ideas you test, then observe the results. Nothing more than that. Yet lifting the administration and its definition of learning so high hasn't made either of them greater, just the opposite. By giving these things a status beyond what they deserve, they diminish in significance." Jazzy's hands stopped mid-examination, Junebug's words having caused her to forget what she was doing. Waters sat back, surprised to hear him speak so frankly. Tommy looked at his friend with respectful admiration. "The administration didn't build and design Polus Station or the space elevator. Engineers did that. Sure, they had the backing of the administration, but it didn't build or envision it. The administration didn't create these plants or animals, but it will claim them as its own by the time we're done. We name them, and the administration thinks that somehow it has accomplished something. It didn't. These animals existed and had names before someone from Earth came along, as if the first person to write a paper for the administration were somehow responsible for the animal itself." Junebug took another bite of fruit. Waters felt like he should interrupt this potentially damning speech before Junebug damaged himself irreparably, and looked to Jazzy for support, but she remained dumbfounded that a member of the mission would speak so about the administration. Junebug swallowed and continued. "Don't you see that we lift the administration up so high that we forget it's not the only thing, that it depends on many other things to function? Math isn't the administration, but the administration depends on math. Reason and logic aren't the administration, but the administration depends on reason and logic. There are other ways we can learn, other ways we can know things. We learn history not from the administration, but by studying what people wrote and did. Sure, experts from the administration can help answer some questions, but they can't tell us what motivated someone, why someone started a war, or painted a painting, or believed. We think of what we know as if it has always been, and as if what we know will always be. But what we know changes. You know that by the time we're 50, half of what we know now will either be shown to be dead wrong or replaced with new knowledge? It's even worse if you're in medicine. How long ago did you graduate from medical school, Jazzy? I hope you've kept up, because within 5 years of graduation, half of what a doctor learns is no longer current, superseded by new guidelines and treatments and the administration's own messaging." Jazzy bristled at her profession being singled, but Junebug didn't let that stop him. "Think about what we know. How many times have we been told one thing only for it to be superseded and contradicted the very next year? Sometimes the administration is spectacularly, horribly wrong. The most modern centuries on Earth saw some of the worst instances of human death and suffering, not from wars, but from plans and models developed by the administration's predecessors. But people pushed forward anyway rather than admit a mistake. You could say this is not a problem with the administration but the people in it, but what is the administration without the people interpreting and enacting its regulations? The administration isn't some monolithic, all-knowing, omniscient entity with poor, dumb humans just getting it wrong. Without people, the administration is nothing. Junebug saw the others were uncomfortable and let his eyes fall to the floor, but after a moment he lifted them, resolute, and continued. Jonathan is right. These people are right. I mean, look at them. They're not primitive or hicks. They have all the technology we have and more, and freedom to do and say things like I've never seen. They don't worry about losing their status if they don't keep up with the DID's list of offensive words. And here we are, a team whose mission is the precursor to Mufasa doing just that, resettling them for doing nothing more than believe something the administration says they shouldn't, which I guess is just unacceptable. Somewhere we became a people who believed so much in ourselves we could see nothing else. At the same time, we became so fragile we could not bear even the thought we might be wrong. We're wrong, Alex. We're so wrong, and because of it we have no business telling them they're wrong. Junebug finished and sat back in his bed, staring at the wall, lost in his own thoughts. Waters and Jazzy said nothing. They had listened because this was not some fanatic speaking, not some zealot invested in ideology. This was Junebug, their friend, their colleague. The worst part was that Junebug could be right. These colonists did not need them to educate them, or teach them about governance, or about health and medicine, not about anything. Since they first arrived, the missionaries were the ones receiving an education. They could barely tread the grass without the colonists' help, let alone teach them. Then there was Molly. They had never seen her happier since she left the team. No, she was not simply happy. That was too trivial a term. It was like she was home. She belonged here. She was joyful. The colonists let her in the city, but none of the rest of them. Why? She was special, that was why. From the beginning, the colonists could see something in her that the rest of them did not have. Jazzy stepped out of the shelter. What Junebug said frightened her. Missionaries were not supposed to speak like that. The administration was beyond reproach. It was part of their oath. They were never to criticize the administration. It made sense. You could not open and close a door at the same time. How could someone advocate for the administration and disapprove of it at the same time? Yet she did not want to report Junebug. He was a friend, yes, but what frightened her the most was that what he said might make sense. Waters had changed since they killed the APOC. Junebug had changed too, or developed the courage to say what he thought all along. These were not colonists. These were her colleagues. These were her friends. What did that mean for her? She found that if she were honest with herself, she did not want Waters to report it either. She looked and saw the rover was gone. He took it, she said aloud in her surprise. He's going to make the report now. We're not ready yet, not now. It's too soon. She had to stop him, to reason with him. He would listen. He loved her, yes, though she did not love him. But she would not need that, not this time. He would listen to reason first. Her equipment was in the rover. She could not don her envirosuit or use her phone to track it, but it did not matter. The rover carved deep ruts in the earth wherever it traveled. She could follow its path easily enough. The rover's treads led up a hill away from the city. She knew the valley well by now, but had never been so far away from camp. She was surprised at how difficult the trek was. Although the rover's tracks made it manageable, the effort was tiring. She breathed heavily and needed to stop often. She turned and jumped at the sight of Polus bears following her. "You startled me," she said aloud. The Polus bears stomped their feet with pleasure at her words, but she turned and kept going. They followed her, and other animals joined them. Birds sang and insects buzzed. Although physically exhausting, the walk was not unpleasant. It was like a good bout of exercise. It filled her with energy even as she worked. She could see why the others enjoyed hiking in the hills. The trees broke near the top of the hill, and she saw the rover at last. She stopped to rest and noticed the Polus bears had gone. The birds had too, and the top of the hill was quiet. She could see Bo on top of the rover, fiddling with the communications array. "Is this why you took the rover? So you could make a report without me?" Jazzy said as she approached. "This was something we were going to do together." She climbed into the rover and threw the hatch onto the roof. "Waters has failed to show himself an effective director. It's time Mufasa knew about it, and it's time for a change," Bo snapped. Jazzy was surprised at his tone. "Stay back, Jazzy," Bo said, holding his palms out towards her. "I can almost get a signal, and I don't need you messing up what I've accomplished here the way you've helped mess up everything else." "You plan to make a play to take over as director yourself," she said. "Our report to Mufasa is overdue," Bo said. "There are many crucial pieces of information we need to share. The intransigence of the colonists, their poor reception towards your medical clinic, their unwillingness to let us in the city, how Waters slaughtered the APOC, and perhaps most crucial of all, the loss of a missionary, the administration's own darling." "But that's my job, and Waters' job as director, not yours. You're not even a deputy of the mission," Jazzy said. "The administration needs to know about his failures, particularly the loss of a team member to an unorthodox philosophy. You've put off making the report for too long. Someone has to tell them so they can make appropriate changes," Bo said. "You're wrong. You think they'll put you in charge, but they won't. All it will mean is the premature end of the mission and an excuse for Mufasa to step in and resettle the colonists. You'll get nothing from this," Jazzy said. "That may be, but at least he won't be in charge anymore," Bo said. "She can't stand the thought I might report her failures too," he thought. "You were only ever interested in yourself anyway. That much is clear now, but it should have always been clear. You may deny it, but you want to report my failures too so that I will be removed as competition for director and you will be named in my place. Is that why you slept with me? To make me easier to manipulate?" That got Jazzy's ire, and she forgot her reason for going after him. "Bo, that was a mistake. I was vulnerable then. Don't deny you didn't take advantage, though. You've wanted to sleep with me all along. Everyone can see the way you look at me, the way you have looked at me. But it had nothing to do with seeing you as competition. Truthfully, you're no competition at all. Driving the rover up here, for example. It would have been easier to take the rover back to the plains for a clear signal than to drive to the top of this stupid mountain." Bo struggled against a piece of equipment on top of the rover and did not answer. At last, a piece of the rover's transmitter broke off and he fell over backwards. He lashed out at the rover and kicked the equipment. Knowing that a tantrum wouldn't help his situation, Bo composed himself and went back to work. "Come and put your finger here," he said. "It's as I thought. She wants to be director. This whole time she's been acting as if she were in charge anyway, barking orders at the missionaries, telling us what we ought to do." Jazzy stepped forward and held a piece of wire in place. Bo pulled out his phone and checked a diagram, though his eyes could not help flitting to Jazzy. "Just look at her. Even now she's using me. I'm nothing more than a prop to her. She's so desperate to make this precious report first that she won't look at me." "It's no good," Jazzy said. "There's too much interference. These mountains, these trees, even the atmosphere." "But we have line of sight to the space elevator. Look, you can make it out from here," he said. Bo was not wrong. From the top of the mountain, the great tower and scaffolding of the space elevator under construction was visible above the horizon, hazy gray-blue at this distance, but there nonetheless. "Line of sight isn't helping. The atmosphere is filled with the same kind of wavelength the Li-Fi transmitter uses. It's causing destructive interference. Between that and the mountains, we can't even raise Polus Station when it passes by in orbit," she said. "Know-it-all," Bo scoffed. "You've always been insufferable." "Well, this was your idea, and it hasn't worked at all. Now we don't have a working Li-Fi transmitter, and our rover is on the top of a mountain where no one could use it anyway, even if it did work. I hope you realize I will have to report this insubordination once we finally do make contact," she said. "That's not to mention your clinic, which you haven't even maintained properly. It's no wonder none of the colonists want to seek care from you," he said. "The clinic was damaged in the storm. We don't have the supplies to make repairs," Jazzy protested. "I'm not surprised, given how abrasive you are to them. From the moment we made contact, you were trying to order them around, as if they'd just let us into their city. Can you imagine?" Bo raised his voice. "Well, someone had to show some leadership, with you all just standing there, mouth agape, ogling all the colonial women. That's probably something I should report as well," Jazzy matched his tone. "I did no such thing, as if you're really one to talk." At least they have some real men among them. You're nothing to be proud of." That hurt Bo. First his hackles rose at the jab, but then he softened and relaxed his shoulders. "Jazzy, why won't you have me? Am I so despicable to you? Am I that much less than Alex to you?" Jazzy, however, had not relaxed at all. "I'm sure Mufasa would be very interested to know more about our relationship when we do finally contact them, about how you inappropriately took advantage when I was at my worst to coerce me to bed, how you demanded sexual favors in exchange for your silence on the status of the clinic. No one will believe that." "Won't they? Are you willing to lie and say we haven't slept together? I can provide them with proof. I have samples if need be." "No one would believe you. You have access to who knows what from every missionary as the team physician." "But not samples taken from within my own body," she retorted. "No one will even think twice about what I have to say then. They'll believe me, but they'll have questions for you. Oh, yes, they will. You'll be done and shipped back to Earth in disgrace, in shackles even. Mufasa never supported the mission having a media specialist anyway." Bo considered her carefully. "That will mean a messy investigation for you as well, and I'll say whatever I care then. It won't matter if it's true or not. They'll still have to investigate it, and who knows what they'll find during the investigation. Perhaps something on how you treated or didn't treat a certain missionary." "I have no idea what you mean," Jazzy said. "How long did you think you could hide that you were feeding Molly aspirin instead of her proper medication?" Bo said. "You just had to make sure you were better than her, didn't you? What did you call her? Our little celebrity? An ethics violation like that against such a high-profile patient will mean a board inquiry at least. Whatever they choose to do to me, you won't get out of this clean either." They stood, neither ceded to the other, but they silently acknowledged the stalemate. "I could throw her down the mountain, right now. I could get away with it, too. Isn't that all that matters? A simple slip is all it would take. Everyone knows none of us are adapted to this world, least of all her. She hasn't shown herself to be the most adroit member of the team either, the way she sliced her hands open almost as soon as we arrived." "I think we're done here," Jazzy said finally. She left the array, dropped in the hatch, and started the rover. Beyond her, Bo thought he saw a shadow leap into the trees. "You're losing your mind. It's nothing." Their trip down the mountain was as quiet as the very land around them. The usual cadre of animals and birds, even insects that would normally have accompanied anyone who so much as stepped outside, was absent. There was no birdsong, no thumping and grunting and hoofing, only they two and their seething silence. Bo sat in the back behind Jazzy, far enough away that she would not hear if he chose to mutter, but close enough that he could watch her. He was safe for now. She could make no allegation to the administration. Neither could he, however. But does it need to be that way? Polus is a dangerous place. Despite what the colonists might say, it is still a natural environment. Accidents happen naturally. Not so natural ones, too. She could slip. Perhaps she has an allergy to some insect. An allergy to your own hand, perhaps. Why recoil at the thought? Do we not determine our own morality? Have we not ascended beyond quaint notions of crime and punishment, of heaven and hell? You must do what you need to protect yourself. You must advance your interests. Hers no longer align with yours. Fear not the consequences, there need be none. They reached the bottom of the hill and parked the rover. Bo walked away and paused outside the enclosure that had once held Molly's APOC, before Waters had let his friend go, before Waters had killed his friend. It was empty now. Bo turned and stopped short. He was face to face with the APOC itself. It almost smiled at him, but an animal cannot smile. They were so close he could feel its hot breath on his face. Yet it was calm, and he was calm. This was certainly a dangerous creature, probably a predator, but he knew that whatever peril it had planned was not for him. Then a thought occurred to him, as if from outside himself. "Jazzy," he called. "Can you come here, please?" The APOC shifted instantly. It backed into the foliage, camouflaging itself. Its toothy grin was the last thing he saw as it blended into the trees. "Jazzy!" he called once more. Then a third time, "Jazzy!" At last she appeared around the side of the rover. "What, Bo? What is it? What do you need?" "Come here for a moment." Jazzy walked forward and stood directly across from him, her arms crossed, one hip thrust out to the side. "Did you think of something else you need to say?" Bo stared at her. "I've decided something important. Something we've known all along, but I feel as if I've only just discovered it for myself." Jazzy shook her head in annoyance. "What have you discovered?" Bo pushed Jazzy back into the clutches of the APOC, which materialized from the underbrush as they spoke. It stifled her scream with a gnarly paw. Its long, needly claws drew blood where they pricked her face. The APOC gave Bo a knowing grin, that is, if animals were capable of grinning, and lifted her body as it carried her into the woods. Jazzy looked back at Bo with open eyes full of terror. He took a few steps back and sat down on the same overturned crate by the pen to which he had become accustomed. His heart pounded, but he felt calm. He breathed deeply and told himself, "Don't worry. There will be no consequences." She was gone.